He forced a ring on my finger and called it marriage. But the moment I whispered yes through tears, I saw something flicker behind his cold eyes, something that looked almost like regret. And I realized, we were both prisoners now. Before we dive into this emotional journey, if you're enjoying these stories of unexpected love and redemption, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might just change how you see the world. Now, let's begin. The fluorescent lights of St. Vincent's Hospital emergency room flickered like dying stars, casting sickly shadows across cracked linoleum that had seen too much blood. Valentina Romano's scrubs were stained with someone else's tragedy, a car accident victim who didn't make it, and her hands trembled slightly as she logged the time of death into the computer. 3:47 a.m. The graveyard shift suited her life perfectly, operating in darkness, watching people teeter between survival and surrender. "Val, you're off in 13 minutes, Carla," the head nurse said softly, appearing beside her with a kind of gentleness reserved for the walking wounded. "Go see him." Valentina didn't argue. She never did when it came to Luca. The pediatric oncology ward on the 4th floor was quieter, softer, painted in yellows and blues that were supposed to inspire hope but mostly just reminded everyone that children shouldn't be this close to death. Room 412. She knew the number by heart, had walked this path so many times her feet had probably worn grooves in the floor. Luca was awake, his 8-year-old face too thin, too pale, but his eyes, those Romano eyes, dark as espresso, sparkled when he saw her. "You look terrible," he said, his voice papery. "You're one to talk, but head." She settled into the chair beside his bed, taking his small hand in hers. His skin felt like tissue paper. "Did you eat your dinner?" "The Jell-O. The rest was gross." He paused, studying her face with the unsettling perception of children who'd spent too much time around adults in crisis. "You've been crying." "I'm tired." "You're scared." She was terrified. The latest round of chemotherapy wasn't working. Dr. Patel had used words like experimental treatment, and clinical trial, and significant cost, always circling back to that last phrase like a vulture. The number he'd mentioned made her chest constrict. $380,000. Might as well have been $3 million. "I'm fine," she lied, pressing her lips to his forehead. "You just focus on getting better, okay? Let me handle the grown-up stuff." "Valentina." His voice went serious, and hearing her full name from him always broke something inside her. "If the money people come again." "They won't." But they would. They always did. Across the city, in a penthouse that overlooked Boston like a throne surveying its kingdom, Dante Moretti stood before floor-to-ceiling windows, watching dawn bleed across the skyline. He held a glass of 30-year-old scotch, but he hadn't taken a sip. Behind him, a man knelt on marble floors, zip-tied and shaking. "Please," the man, Sergio, once a trusted lieutenant, whispered. "I have a family. Kids." "So did the people you sold to the Bratva," Dante replied without turning. His voice was smooth, cultured, a violin string pulled taut before snapping. "3 of my men died because of your information. Men with families. With kids. I'll disappear. You'll never." "You're right about that." Dante finally turned, and the man's pleading died in his throat. Dante's face was beautiful in the way Renaissance paintings depicted angels before the fall. Sharp cheekbones, full lips, dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in museums. But his eyes, gray as gunmetal, held nothing but winter. He nodded once. The shot was quiet, a silenced .22, professional, clean. Sergio crumpled. 2 men materialized from the shadows to remove the body. They dispose of it in the usual way. The harbor had swallowed many of Dante's problems. Boss Marco, his underboss and closest thing to a friend, approached with a tablet. The accountant finished the audit. "Some interesting discoveries." Dante moved to his desk, all dark wood and leather, setting down the untouched scotch. "Show me." Marco pulled up files, debts, outstanding loans, people who owed the Moretti family. Most had been paying on time since Dante took control 6 years ago. He'd built his reputation on consistency. Pay your debts, live. Betray him, die. Simple mathematics. But one file made him pause. "Romano," Marco said. "Antonio Romano borrowed $150,000 8 years ago for his daughter's medical school tuition and his son's treatment. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. He paid for 3 years, then died in a car accident. The debt transferred to his daughter, Valentina. She's been trying to pay, but..." He shrugged. "She's drowning. Works as a nurse, barely covers interest." Dante studied the file. Valentina Romano, 26. The attached photo showed a woman with long dark hair, olive skin, eyes that held fire and exhaustion in equal measure. Even in a driver's license photo, she was striking, not conventionally beautiful, but there was something magnetic about her face. Strength in the jaw. Defiance in the slight lift of her chin. "Current debt with penalties?" Dante asked. $240,000. "And she's paid." "About $70,000 over 5 years. But the kid needs another treatment now. Experimental. Expensive." She's been reaching out to loan sharks. Dangerous ones. Dante's jaw tightened. He hated loan sharks, parasites who preyed on desperation. At least his family had rules, structure. These vultures had nothing but greed. She'll get eaten alive, Marco said quietly. The Volkov brothers are circling. They'll own her in a month, then use her for. He didn't finish. They both knew what men like the Volkovs did with beautiful women in debt. Dante stared at the photo. Something about her eyes reminded him of Gianna, his sister, that same fierce determination not to break even when the world demanded it. Set up a meeting, he said suddenly. Marco blinked. Boss. With Valentina Romano. Tonight. Bring her to the estate. We're collecting the debt. Dante closed the file, but her face lingered in his mind. Something like that. As Marco left, Dante returned to the windows. The sun was fully up now, turning Boston's glass towers into mirrors. He caught his reflection, a man in a $5,000 suit who commanded an empire built on blood and fear. A man who'd killed his first person at 17 and stopped counting at 30. A man who hadn't felt anything real in so long, he'd forgotten what it was like. He looked at her photo one more time before slipping it into his jacket pocket, right above his heart. A decision had been made. Valentina Romano would be his wife. She just didn't know it yet. Valentina was halfway through microwaving leftover pasta when they came for her. 3 men. 2 well-dressed for her neighborhood in Dorchester. Dark suits that probably cost more than her monthly rent, shoes polished to mirrors. The kind of men who didn't knock so much as announce themselves, their presence filling her tiny apartment doorway like smoke. Valentina Romano? The one in front was older, his face carved from granite. Not unkind, but immovable. Her fork clattered against the counter. Who's asking? Mr. Moretti would like to speak with you. It's about your father's debt. The world tilted slightly. She'd known this was coming, had felt it approaching like a storm on the horizon, but hearing the name Moretti made her blood turn to slush. Everyone in Boston knew that name. Knew what it meant. I'm making payments, she said, hating how her voice shook. I have documentation. This isn't a collection call, miss. Mr. Moretti wants to discuss a resolution. The man's tone suggested refusal wasn't an option. We have a car waiting. 20 minutes later, Valentina sat in the back of a black Mercedes, watching the city transform from her world of triple-deckers and corner stores into something else entirely. Waterfront properties, gated estates, the kind of wealth that didn't advertise because it didn't need to. The Moretti estate sat on a peninsula in Weston, all stone and iron gates and windows that watched like eyes. Security cameras tracked their approach. Men with earpieces nodded them through checkpoints. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress. They led her through a foyer that could fit her entire apartment, past art that belonged in museums, into a study lined with leather-bound books that had probably never been read. A fire crackled in the hearth despite the mild spring evening. Everything was designed to intimidate. It was working. Miss Romano. The voice came from the shadows near the window, smooth as expensive liquor. He stepped into the light, and Valentina's breath caught despite herself. Dante Moretti was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s, maybe. Photographs didn't do him justice. He was beautiful in a way that felt dangerous, like a knife with an ornate handle. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. His suit was midnight blue, perfectly tailored. But it was his eyes that held her, gray, calculating, and utterly unreadable. Sit, he said. Not a request. She remained standing. I'd rather not. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or amusement. Brave or foolish. Tired, she shot back. I worked a double shift. I need to be back at the hospital in 6 hours. So whatever this is. Your brother is dying. The words hit like a fist. She swayed slightly, gripping the back of a chair. Dante continued, his voice clinical. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The current treatment protocol isn't working. Dr. Patel has recommended an experimental CAR T-cell therapy trial at Dana-Farber. Cost, $380,000, not including hospital stay and follow-up care. You have approximately $3,000 in savings and a credit score that ensures no legitimate lender will touch you. He paused. Am I wrong about any of this? Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. What do you want? To offer you a solution. He moved to his desk, opened a folder. Inside was a photograph, her father, young and smiling, shaking hands with an older man who could only be Dante's father. The resemblance was striking. Your father borrowed $150,000 from my family. He paid for 3 years before his death. With penalties and interest, the current debt is $240,000. Dante looked up. I'm prepared to forgive that debt entirely and provide the full $380,000 for your brother's treatment, including all associated medical costs for the next 5 years. Valentina's heart hammered. In exchange for what? Marriage. The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. You're insane, she whispered. I'm practical. He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. I need a wife. You need money. It's a transaction. Why me? You could have anyone. I don't want anyone. His eyes remained steady on hers. I want someone without connections to other families. Someone whose loyalty I can ensure through mutual benefit. Someone who understands what gratitude looks like. Gratitude. Anger flared hot in her chest. You mean someone you can control? If you prefer. She laughed, but it came out broken. This is insane. I don't even know you. You're asking me to. I'm offering you your brother's life. His voice went quiet, and somehow that was worse than if he'd shouted. In 60 seconds, I'm going to ask you a question. If you say no, you walk out that door, and we never speak again. Your debt will be called in full within 30 days. The Volkov brothers, who've been watching you by the way, will make their offer. And we both know what they'll want in exchange. Valentina felt the walls closing in. And if I say yes? Papers will be filed tomorrow. We'll be married within the week. Luca will be admitted to Dana-Farber by Monday. You'll move into the penthouse, present yourself as my wife at required functions. In exchange, your brother lives, your debt disappears, and you'll want for nothing materially. Except freedom. Something passed through his eyes then, was it regret? But it vanished so quickly she might have imagined it. There are worse prisons than comfort, Miss Romano. He pulled out his phone, set it on the desk between them. The timer read 60 seconds. Choose. He pressed start. The ticking was the loudest sound she'd ever heard. Louder than hospital machines. Louder than her heartbeat. She thought of Luca, his laugh, his terrible jokes, the way he still reached for her hand when he was scared. 8 years old and fighting a war his body was losing. What would you do if someone held your entire world hostage? Tell me in the comments. 40 seconds. She thought of her father, weak and broken by gambling debts, dying behind the wheel with apologies on his lips. She'd promised him she'd take care of Luca. Promised. 20 seconds. She looked at Dante Moretti, this beautiful, terrifying stranger who held her brother's life in his hands like it was a business ledger. His face revealed nothing, but his fingers tapped once against the desk. A tell. He was nervous. He was human. 10 seconds. I need to know one thing, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. 5 seconds. Will you hurt him? My brother. 3. Never. 2. The timer hit 0. Yes, she whispered. The word came out broken, carried on a breath that felt like surrender. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, silent, furious tears that she couldn't stop. Dante's expression didn't change. He simply nodded, stopped the timer, and closed the folder. But Valentina saw it, just for a heartbeat, just for a fraction of a second before he locked it away. Guilt. It flickered in those gray eyes like a candle in a storm, there and gone, but she'd seen it. She'd witnessed the crack in his armor. And somehow, that was the most terrifying thing of all. Because monsters didn't feel guilt. But men did. My attorney will contact you tomorrow with the arrangements, Dante said quietly. Marco will drive you home. She turned to leave on shaking legs, but his voice stopped her at the door. Valentina. She didn't turn around. For what it's worth. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was different. Softer. Almost human. I'm sorry it has to be this way. She left without responding, because if she tried to speak, she would have screamed. Outside, in the Mercedes, she finally let herself break. And in his study, Dante Moretti poured himself another scotch he wouldn't drink and stared at the phone that had counted down to both their fates. He'd told himself this was strategy. Business. Survival. But the taste in his mouth was ash. And the look in her eyes, that mixture of defiance and devastation, was already haunting him. The wedding took place on a Thursday morning in a judge's private chambers, with all the warmth of a corporate merger. Valentina wore a simple cream dress she'd bought at Target 3 years ago for a friend's bridal shower. No veil. No flowers. No music. Just her, Dante in another immaculate suit, Judge Harrigan who clearly owed the Moretti family favors, and 2 witnesses she'd never met and would never see again. The whole ceremony lasted 8 minutes. Do you, Valentina Maria Romano, take this man? Yes. She cut him off, unable to bear the charade of romance. Her voice was hollow. Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. And do you, Dante Alessandro Moretti? Yes. The judge looked between them, clearly sensing the frost, but he was paid not to ask questions. By the power vested in me by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the... That won't be necessary, Dante said smoothly. The judge closed his book. Congratulations. The word felt obscene. Valentina signed the marriage certificate with a hand that didn't feel like her own. Mrs. Valentina Moretti. The name looked wrong, felt wrong, like clothes that didn't fit. Dante's signature appeared below hers, bold, decisive strokes that somehow seemed possessive even in ink. It's done, he said quietly, more to himself than to her. She walked out without looking back. The penthouse was a monument to expensive emptiness. 3,000 square feet of glass and marble overlooking Boston Harbor. Everything in shades of gray and white and chrome, beautiful, sterile, utterly lifeless. Like living inside a photograph from an architecture magazine. A place designed to impress, not to be lived in. Your room is down this hall, Dante said, leading her past a living area that could host a cocktail party. The master suite is on the opposite side. You'll have privacy. That stopped her. We're not. No. His voice was flat. This is a legal arrangement, not a romantic one. You'll have your own space. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt something more complicated, a mixture of gratitude and inexplicable rejection that made no sense. She didn't want to share his bed. Of course she didn't. So why did his easy dismissal sting? Your brother was admitted to Dana-Farber this morning, Dante continued, pulling out his phone and showing her a message from Dr. Patel. Treatment begins Monday. I've arranged for a car to take you to visit him whenever you want. There will be security. Security. You're a Moretti now. That comes with risks. His eyes met hers for the first time since the courthouse. People will try to use you to get to me. I won't let that happen. How considerate, she said acidly. Protecting your investment. Something flashed across his face, anger, hurt, she couldn't tell. The household staff will be by in the morning. If you need anything. I need to not be here. The words came out sharper than she intended, but she didn't take them back. She was exhausted, bone-deep, soul-tired, running on fumes and fury. The last 72 hours had been a nightmare, the forced proposal, the rushed paperwork, explaining to Luca why she was suddenly married to a man she'd never mentioned, watching her little brother's confused face try to process why his sister looked so sad at her own wedding. She'd lied. Told him it was happy tears. Told him she was in love. 8-year-olds believe what they need to believe. Dante's expression shuddered. Your room has everything you need. I'll have your belongings brought from your apartment tomorrow. I can get my own. No. His voice went hard. You live here now. That apartment is part of your old life. You don't get to erase my life. I just bought it. He turned away, loosening his tie with sharp movements. The refrigerator is stocked. Wi-Fi password is on the counter. I have work to do. He walked toward what she assumed was his office, but she called after him, her voice shaking with barely contained rage. Do you even feel anything? Or is this just another day for you? He stopped. Didn't turn around. What would you like me to feel, Valentina? Guilt? I feel it. Regret? I have that too. But I made a calculated decision based on mutual benefit, and I don't apologize for saving your brother's life. You're not saving him. You're buying him. There's a difference. Now he did turn, and the look in his eyes was cold enough to burn. Tell me, in 6 months when Luca is in remission, when he's laughing and playing and alive, will you still hate me? Or will you cash the checks and pretend you didn't sell yourself for his survival? The slap came before she could think about it. Her palm connected with his cheek with a crack that echoed through the penthouse. Her hand stung. His head had barely moved, but a red mark bloomed across his perfect skin. They stood frozen, both shocked. Valentina waited for retaliation. A shout, a threat, violence. She just struck a Mafia boss. Men had died for less. But Dante just looked at her with those winter-gray eyes, touched his cheek once, and said quietly, feel better. No. Good. We understand each other. He turned again. Don't wait up. He disappeared into his office, and the door closed with a soft, final click. Valentina stood in the palatial living room, surrounded by luxury she'd never wanted, married to a man she despised, trapped in a cage made of chrome and glass and impossible choices. She found her room. It was beautiful, of course. King-size bed with silk sheets, ensuite bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people, a walk-in closet already filled with clothes in her size. Designer labels. Expensive fabrics. Everything except freedom. She locked the door, slid down against it, and finally let herself cry great, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. For her brother. For herself. For the girl she'd been 72 hours ago who still believed she had choices. Down the hall in his office, Dante sat in darkness nursing his bruised cheek and a tumbler of scotch he actually drank this time. His face still burned where she'd hit him. No one had dared touch him in violence since he'd taken control of the family. No one had dared show him that kind of raw emotion, pure, unfiltered, honest. It should have made him angry. Instead, he felt alive for the first time in years. He pulled her photo from his jacket pocket, the driver's license image he'd been carrying since Marco first showed him the file. Her defiant eyes stared back at him. What have I done? He whispered to the empty room. But the darkness didn't answer. And the walls of his penthouse prison echoed with a loneliness that had nothing to do with being alone. The first 3 days of marriage were a masterclass in avoidance. Valentina woke early, left for the hospital before Dante emerged from his wing of the penthouse, and returned late to find evidence of his existence. A coffee cup in the sink, papers on the dining table, the faint scent of his cologne in the hallway, but never the man himself. It was almost like living alone. Almost. Except she could feel him everywhere, in the way the staff spoke in hushed, respectful tones, in the security detail that shadowed her every movement, in the black credit card that appeared on her nightstand with a note in sharp, angular handwriting. Use it. D. She hadn't touched it. On the fourth morning, everything changed. Valentina was getting ready to visit Luca when Dante appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked like he hadn't slept, tie loose, sleeves rolled up, dark circles under his eyes that somehow made him more devastating instead of less. I'm coming with you, he said without preamble. She paused mid-sip of coffee. Where? To see your brother. No. It wasn't a request. He grabbed his jacket from a chair. There's been chatter. Someone's asking questions about you, about Luca. Until I know who, you don't go anywhere alone. I have security. Who work for me and could be compromised. His eyes were hard. Someone in my organization is feeding information to rivals. Until I find them, I don't trust anyone with your safety except myself. The word "your" hung in the air between them, possessive in a way that made her pulse quicken for reasons she refused to examine. Luca doesn't know what you are, she said quietly. He thinks you're a businessman. If you show up with guns and... I know how to behave around children, Valentina. Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. There was an old pain there, carefully hidden but present. Fine, she relented. But you follow my lead. And if you scare him... I won't. Dana-Farber Cancer Institute was a fortress of hope and heartbreak, all clean lines and soft colors designed to make people forget they were in a place where children fought for their lives. Luca was awake when they arrived, propped up on pillows, already looking better than he had in weeks. The new treatment was working, or at least, not actively failing. Small victories. His face lit up when he saw Valentina, but his eyes went wide when Dante entered behind her. Whoa, Luca breathed. You're tall. Dante's lips twitched, the closest thing to a smile Valentina had seen from him. You're observant. Are you really my sister's husband? I am. Do you love her? The question landed like a grenade in the sterile room. Valentina's breath caught. Dante didn't hesitate. Yes. The lie was smooth, practiced, perfect. But something in his voice made it sound almost true. Luca seemed satisfied, but Valentina felt the word burrow under her skin like a splinter. Cool. Luca gestured to the chair beside his bed. Want to see my comic books? I'm designing my own superhero. His name is Captain Cure and he fights cancer cells with laser beams. Dante sat, and Valentina watched something extraordinary happen. The cold, calculating Mafia boss folded himself into a chair meant for parents and listened with genuine attention as an 8-year-old explained elaborate storylines involving medical science and superpowers. He asked questions. Real ones. What's Captain Cure's weakness? He doesn't have one, Luca said firmly. Every hero has a weakness. It's what makes them interesting. Luca considered this seriously. Maybe he's too brave? Like, he tries to save everyone and sometimes he can't, and that makes him sad. Dante's expression shifted, something raw and unguarded crossing his face before he locked it away. That's a good weakness. The hardest battles are the ones we can't win. Did you ever lose a battle? Luca asked with a child's blunt curiosity. Silence stretched. Valentina was about to intervene when Dante spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes. My little sister. She was sick like you. She didn't make it. The admission hung in the air, vulnerable and honest. Valentina's heart clenched. She hadn't expected him to share that, to give a piece of his real self to her brother. Luca reached out and patted Dante's hand with a solemn gravity only children possess. I'm sorry. That's really sad. It was a long time ago. Does it still hurt? Every day. The honesty in those two words broke something in Valentina. She watched Dante, this dangerous, powerful man who'd forced her into marriage, being unmade by a child's compassion. I'm going to beat this, Luca said with the fierce certainty of the young. And then I'll dedicate the first Captain Cure comic to your sister. What was her name? Gianna. That's pretty. I'll make her a character too. She can be Captain Cure's guardian angel who gives him advice. Dante's jaw worked, and for a terrifying moment, Valentina thought he might actually cry. But he composed himself, nodded once. She would have liked that. They stayed for 2 hours. Dante never checked his phone, never seemed impatient. He helped Luca color in sketches, discussed plot holes and superhero logic, and at one point, did voices for different characters that made Luca laugh so hard a nurse came in to check on him. Valentina sat in the corner, watching, her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. This wasn't the man who'd given her 60 seconds to decide her fate. This wasn't the cold strategist who'd reduced her life to a transaction. This was someone else entirely. Someone human. Someone grieving. In the hospital corridor, waiting while a nurse checked Luca's vitals, Dante leaned against the wall, staring at nothing. Thank you, Valentina said quietly. For what? For being kind to him. For telling him about Gianna. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. He looked at her finally, and his eyes were storm gray and devastating. He deserves the truth. At least, the parts of it that won't hurt him. The parts that won't hurt him don't include you forcing me into marriage. No, he agreed. They don't. She studied his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the exhaustion etched into his features, the way his hands were clenched as if holding something together by sheer will. How old was she? Gianna. 16. I was 19. He swallowed hard. Leukemia, like Luca. But treatments weren't as good then. And we didn't have the money at first. By the time my father acquired it, it was too late. Acquired. Such a careful word for what she suspected was violence. Is that why you built your empire? For money to save people. I built it for power. His voice went cold again, the mask sliding back into place. So I'd never be powerless again. So I could buy anything, fix anything, control anything. Money is just the currency of power. And I'm something you bought. Something to control. He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath hitch. You're the one thing I can't control, Valentina. And that terrifies me. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his entire demeanor changed, tension flooding back into his shoulders. We need to leave. Now. What? Why? Marco just sent a coded alert. We've been tracked here. Someone knows Luca is your weakness. He was already moving, hand on her elbow, guiding her down the hall. I have men positioning around the hospital, but we need to move you before. An explosion of sound, not gunfire but close. Shouting. The fire alarm shrieking to life. Dante pulled her against the wall, his body a shield, one hand reaching beneath his jacket where she knew a gun waited. Stay behind me, he commanded, the gentleman from Luca's room vanishing entirely, replaced by the predator. Don't leave my sight. And despite everything, the forced marriage, the lack of choice, the impossible situation, Valentina realized something that should have terrified her. She trusted him to keep her safe. God help her, she trusted him. The explosion turned out to be a kitchen fire in the hospital cafeteria, grease igniting, triggering the sprinkler system and general chaos, but nothing more sinister. Still, Dante kept Valentina locked in a private conference room with 2 armed guards while he swept the building with Marco and his team. False alarm. But the tension didn't leave his body even when they returned to the penthouse 3 hours later, soaked from rain and adrenaline. You're going to give yourself a heart attack, Valentina said, watching him pace the living room like a caged animal. Someone is watching you. Watching Luca. He ran a hand through his wet hair, disheveling it in a way that made him look younger, more vulnerable. They knew we'd be at the hospital. They're either tracking you or they have someone inside my organization. Maybe it was just a fire. I don't believe in coincidence. He stopped pacing, looked at her with something close to desperation. I need you to understand, my world is dangerous. People I love become targets. It's why I don't let anyone close. It's why I... He cut himself off, but the implication hung between them. It's why I'm already regretting this marriage. Valentina should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt something more complicated, a strange protectiveness for this man who'd forced her into his life and now seemed trapped by the consequences. I need a shower, she said quietly. And sleep. We'll figure this out tomorrow. But sleep didn't come. At 2 a.m., restless and wired, Valentina found herself wandering the penthouse. She'd been careful to respect boundaries, staying in her wing, but tonight the silence felt oppressive. She needed to understand the man she'd married, not the monster she'd imagined, but the complicated, grieving person she'd glimpsed at the hospital. The penthouse had a library. She'd seen it on her first day but hadn't explored. Books lined mahogany shelves from floor to ceiling, leather-bound classics and modern hardcovers arranged with careful precision. It smelled like old paper and whiskey. And there, behind a large desk, was a door. Closed but not locked. Valentina knew she shouldn't. Knew this was a violation of the fragile truce they'd established. She opened it anyway. The room beyond was small, intimate, nothing like the stark minimalism of the rest of the penthouse. The walls were covered in photographs, dozens of them, creating a mosaic of memory. A young Dante with a gap-toothed smile, arms around a little girl with dark curls and laughing eyes. Gianna. The resemblance to Luca was striking, same mischievous grin, same brightness. There were letters too, framed and mounted. Valentina moved closer, reading. Dear Dante, I know you're trying to be brave for me, but you don't have to. Sometimes it's okay to be scared. I'm scared too. Love, your little monster. Dante, the doctor said I might not get to go to high school. Promise me something? Don't become like Papa. Don't let this make you hard. The world has enough angry men. Love, G. Big brother, if I don't make it, promise you'll still laugh sometimes. Promise you'll find someone who makes you happy. You deserve to be happy. I love you more than all the stars. Gianna. The last letter was dated 2 weeks before she died. Valentina's vision blurred. She pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed by the weight of grief preserved in this secret room. This was Dante's shrine, his private place to mourn. You shouldn't be in here. The voice was quiet, but sharp. Valentina spun to find Dante in the doorway, wearing only sleep pants, his chest bare, expression unreadable. I'm sorry, Get out. Dante. I said get out. The roar was anguished more than angry, and she saw what he'd been hiding, tears tracking down his face, vulnerability stripped bare. You have no right. You're right, she said, standing her ground despite the tremor in her voice. I don't. But I needed to understand why you're doing this. Why me, why the marriage, why any of it? I told you. Strategy. Power. Control. Bullshit. The word came out fierce. You're trying to save me the way you couldn't save her. You saw Luca and you saw Gianna, and you thought maybe this time you could be the hero instead of the helpless brother watching someone die. He flinched like she'd struck him. Don't pretend you understand. My mother left when Luca got sick. The words poured out of Valentina, her own walls crumbling. Packed her bags and disappeared because she couldn't watch another person she loved suffer. My father gambled away every cent trying to win enough for treatments, then drove his car into a tree because he couldn't face his failure. I was 19 years old alone, responsible for a 6-year-old with cancer and mountains of debt. She moved closer, and Dante didn't retreat. So don't tell me I don't understand grief. Don't tell me I don't know what it's like to be powerless. I've lived it. I'm living it. The only difference is you had the resources to become powerful enough that you'd never feel that way again. Her voice softened. But you still do, don't you? Feel powerless. His jaw worked. Every single day. The admission broke something between them, the last pretense that this was just business, just strategy. She told you not to become your father, Valentina said, glancing at the letters. But you did anyway. I had no choice. There's always a choice. Easy to say when you're not 19 years old, covered in your sister's blood, making promises to a dying girl that you're already breaking. His voice cracked. She made me promise I'd be good. That I'd find happiness. That I wouldn't let rage consume me. He laughed bitterly. I became a monster within a year of her death. Built an empire on violence and fear. Everything she begged me not to be. Valentina reached out slowly, telegraphing her intention, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. Her hand rested against his bare chest, over his heart. It thundered beneath her palm. You're not a monster, she whispered. You don't know what I've done. I know you spent 2 hours making an 8-year-old boy laugh. I know you told him about Gianna even though it hurt. I know you're protecting me even though I'm just a transaction. She paused. Monsters don't feel guilt. They don't build shrines to their failures. They don't cry. Valentina. I'm not saying I forgive you for forcing this marriage. I'm not saying I don't resent being your captive. Her eyes met his, honest and unflinching. But I'm saying maybe we're both prisoners. You're just locked in a different cage. His hand came up slowly, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything about his reputation. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. I read your father's file, he said quietly. The full one. He didn't borrow money for medical school and treatments. She stiffened. What? He borrowed it to pay off gambling debts to worse people than us. The medical bills came later, after he'd already squandered everything. The money never went to you or Luca. It went to bookies and loan sharks and casinos. His eyes were gentle despite the brutal truth. I'm sorry. You deserved to know. The revelation should have destroyed her. Instead, it felt like a key turning in a lock she didn't know existed. So he lied. Even at the end. Some people can't stop lying, even to the ones they love. Dante's voice carried the weight of experience. My father was the same. Lied to my mother, lied to us, lied to himself about what he was building and why. They stood in Gianna's memorial room, 2 orphans of different tragedies, connected by grief and debt and impossible circumstances. What do we do now? Valentina asked. I don't know. His hand was still on her face, warm and solid. I've always known what to do. Always had a plan, an angle, a strategy. But with you. You're improvising. Terribly. Despite everything, she almost smiled. Me too. The moment stretched, fragile and profound. Dante's eyes dropped to her lips, and Valentina's breath caught. The air between them felt charged, dangerous, like standing too close to lightning. Then his phone shattered the moment, sharp, insistent buzzing. He pulled back, the mask sliding into place as he read the message. His expression went dark. What is it? Marco found the leak. He looked at her, and there was something almost apologetic in his eyes. I have to go handle this. It's going to be violent. You should stay here. Dante. Lock yourself in your room. Don't open the door for anyone but me. He was already moving, pulling on a shirt, checking his gun. I'll explain everything when I get back. Will you be safe? The question stopped him at the door. He looked back, surprised. Why do you care? I don't know, she admitted. But I do. Something shifted in his expression. Hope, maybe, or fear of hope. I'll come back, he promised. I always do. Then he was gone, and Valentina was alone in Gianna's room, surrounded by memories of a girl who'd begged her brother not to become a monster. Too late, she thought. But maybe not too late to become human again. Dante returned at dawn, and Valentina knew immediately that something had changed. She'd stayed awake all night, unable to sleep, pacing her room and then, finally, settling in the library with one of Gianna's letters in her hands. When she heard the elevator, she rushed to the living room. He stood in the doorway, suit jacket gone, shirt stained with what could only be blood. Not his, he moved without injury, but the evidence of violence clung to him like smoke. Are you hurt? Her voice came out more desperate than she intended. No. He looked at her with exhausted eyes. The traitor has been handled. You're safe now. And by handled you mean? Don't ask questions you don't want answered, Valentina. She should have been horrified. Should have recoiled from this man who'd just come from doing unspeakable things. Instead, she found herself crossing the room, reaching for him. You need to clean up, she said softly. Come on. She led him to his bathroom, a space she'd never entered, all marble and chrome and masculine elegance. He stood in the middle of it, seemingly lost, as if the violence had drained him of the ability to function. Dante. She touched his arm. Shower. I'll make coffee. You don't have to. I know. She met his eyes. But I'm going to anyway. 20 minutes later, he emerged in fresh clothes, hair damp, the blood washed away but the weight still present in his expression. She handed him coffee, black, 2 sugars, the way she'd noticed he took it. He stared at the cup. How did you know? I pay attention. They sat on the balcony as the sun climbed over Boston Harbor, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The city woke slowly around them, oblivious to the violence that had occurred in its shadows. His name was Paolo, Dante said finally. He worked for my father, then for me. 15 years. I trusted him. He took a sip of coffee. He was feeding information to the Calabrese family. They wanted to use Luca as leverage, force you to spy on me from the inside. Valentina's blood ran cold. Luca is safe. Marco has tripled security at Dana-Farber. No one gets within 50 feet of him without clearance. He looked at her. I promised you I'd protect him. I keep my promises. Even the ones that cost you. Especially those. Silence settled between them, but it was different now, not hostile, not cold. Something else. Something almost comfortable. Tell me something real, Valentina said. Not the Mafia boss, not the strategist. Just Dante. He considered for a long moment. I wanted to be a doctor. That surprised her. Really? Before Gianna got sick, before everything fell apart. I was pre-med at Boston University. Top of my class. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I thought I could save people. Naive, right? It's not naive. It's beautiful. It's impossible. He set down his coffee. My father was grooming me to take over the family, but I resisted. Said I wanted a different life. He laughed, said I was soft. Then Gianna got sick, and we needed money for treatments. Experimental protocols, specialists, everything that insurance wouldn't cover. His jaw tightened. My father made me a deal, drop out, join the family business, and he'd pay for everything. Oh, Dante. I said yes. Of course I said yes. What else could I do? He stared out at the harbor. I told myself it was temporary. Just until she was better. Then I'd go back, finish school, become the person she believed I could be. But she didn't get better. No. And by the time she died, I was in too deep. I'd done things that couldn't be undone. Seen things that changed me. My father died 6 months later, heart attack, and suddenly I was in charge of an empire I never wanted, surrounded by men who'd kill me if they sensed weakness. He looked at her. So I became what they needed me to be. Ruthless. Cold. Untouchable. Valentina reached across the small table, took his hand. He stared at their joined fingers like they were a foreign concept. Gianna wouldn't want you to live like this, she said gently. I know. But I don't know how to be anything else anymore. Maybe you could learn. Is that what you're doing? Learning to be my wife. The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. She should have said no. Should have reminded him this was forced, temporary, a business arrangement. Instead she said, maybe I'm learning that you're not who I thought you were. Who did you think I was? A monster. And now? Now I think you're a man who's been hurt so badly that hurting others feels like the only way to survive. She squeezed his hand. But survival isn't living, Dante. It's just, not dying. He turned to fully face her, and the vulnerability in his eyes took her breath away. What if I don't remember how to live? Then we figure it out together. The word surprised them both. Together. As if they were partners, not prisoner and captor. Why are you being kind to me? His voice was rough. After everything I've done. Because I see you. She held his gaze. The real you. The one who makes 8-year-olds laugh and builds shrines to his sister and cries when he thinks no one is watching. That's the man I'm choosing to see. Choosing, he repeated. You didn't have a choice in this marriage. No. But I have a choice in how I live within it. She paused. And maybe there are worse fates than being married to someone who understands grief. Who knows what it's like to sacrifice everything for family. Dante stood abruptly, pulling her up with him. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. The intensity in his eyes suggested it. The way his hand cupped her face certainly did. Instead, he pressed his forehead to hers, eyes closed, breathing her in. I don't deserve your compassion, he whispered. Probably not. She smiled against his skin. But you're getting it anyway. They stood like that as the sun rose higher, two broken people learning to exist in the same space without wounding each other further. The days that followed developed a rhythm. Dante worked from home more often, his office door open instead of closed. Valentina discovered he hummed while reading contracts, old Italian songs his mother used to sing. He discovered she stress-baked at 2 a.m., filling the penthouse with the scent of bread and cookies. They had coffee together every morning on the balcony. They visited Luca together 3 times a week, and Dante never missed a visit. He brought comic books, helped with homework, listened to endless superhero plots. Watching him with her brother, Valentina felt something dangerous growing in her chest. Something that felt like affection. One evening, she found him in the library, surrounded by law books and business documents. What are you doing? She asked. Research. He didn't look up. I'm trying to find legitimate ways to transition parts of the business. Clean money. Legal operations. It's complicated, but he finally met her eyes. I want to be better. For Gianna. For Luca. A pause. For you. Valentina's heart clenched. Dante. I know I can't undo the past. Can't wash away the blood or the sins. But maybe I can build something different for the future. He stood, crossed to her. You make me want to try. I'm not your redemption. No. He touched her face, gentle as prayer. But you're my reason to seek it. This time when he leaned in, she didn't pull away. The kiss was soft, tentative, a question, not a demand. His lips were warm, and he tasted like coffee and hope and dangerous possibilities. Valentina melted into it, her hands finding his chest, feeling his heart thunder beneath her palms. When they broke apart, both breathless, he searched her eyes. Tell me to stop. Tell me this is wrong, and I'll. She kissed him again, harder this time, answer enough. They moved to the couch, all tangled limbs and desperate touches, months of tension finally breaking. But when his hands moved to the hem of her shirt, she caught them. Not yet, she whispered. I'm not ready. Okay. He pulled back immediately, no frustration, only understanding. We go at your pace. Always. They lay together instead, her head on his chest, his fingers trailing through her hair. The intimacy felt more profound than anything physical, two guarded people lowering their defenses. What are we doing? She asked into the comfortable silence. I don't know. His voice rumbled through his chest. But I don't want to stop. Neither do I. Have you ever felt something you knew you shouldn't? Drop your story below. Outside, the city sparkled with 1,000 lights. Inside, two people who'd started as enemies discovered they might be something else entirely. Something terrifying. Something real. 3 weeks of fragile happiness shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. Valentina had stopped by the penthouse between shifts. Luca's treatment was going well, she'd picked up extra hours at the hospital, and life had settled into something almost normal. Almost peaceful. She heard voices from Dante's office. The door was cracked open, and she knew she should announce herself, should respect his privacy during business calls. But one name stopped her cold. The Romano girl. That was Marco's voice. Valentina froze in the hallway. The marriage accomplished exactly what we needed, Dante said, his tone businesslike, cold. The voice of the Mafia boss, not the man who'd held her last night. The Calabrese family backed off once they realized she was under our protection. The debt situation neutralized a potential vulnerability. Smart play, boss. Marco again. Using the father's debt as leverage. The girl never saw it coming. She wasn't supposed to. Papers rustled. The brother's treatment is nearly complete. Another few months and we can reassess the arrangement. Valentina's heart turned to ice in her chest. Reassess. Marco sounded confused. You mean divorce? A pause. Too long. Too heavy. It was always meant to be temporary, Dante said finally. A strategic move to prevent enemies from exploiting an asset. Once the threat is neutralized and the boy is in remission, there's no reason to maintain the marriage. But I mean you two seem isn't reality, Marco. Dante's voice went hard. She's useful. The marriage serves a purpose. Let's not confuse business with sentiment. Valentina's vision blurred. She pressed her hand to her mouth, backing away silently, each word a knife between her ribs. Asset. Strategic move. Useful. 3 weeks of coffee on the balcony. 3 weeks of gentle touches and vulnerable conversations. 3 weeks of believing, of hoping, that maybe this forced marriage had become something real. All of it, a lie. She made it to her room before the tears came, hot, furious, humiliated tears. She'd been so stupid. So incredibly naive. He was a mafia boss, a manipulator, a man who'd built an empire on deception and violence. Of course he'd been playing her. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was that she'd started to fall for him. Had let herself imagine a future where this worked, where they chose each other for real. She'd been falling in love with her captor. God, she was pathetic. An hour later, Dante knocked on her door. Valentina? You're home early. I thought you had a double shift. She opened the door, face blotchy but eyes dry now. Rage had burned through the tears. We need to talk. He stepped inside, and she saw the exact moment he realized something was wrong. His expression shifted, concern, then wariness. What happened? I heard your conversation with Marco. Her voice was steady, cold. About your strategic marriage to a useful asset. His face went pale. Valentina. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't insult me by lying. I heard everything. The marriage was always temporary. I was leverage against your enemies. The second Luca is better, you're done with me. That's not, he ran a hand through his hair, frustration radiating off him. You're taking it out of context. Then give me context. She shouted, and he flinched. Tell me I misunderstood. Tell me the last 3 weeks weren't you playing a longer game, making me trust you so I'd be a more compliant wife. That's not what happened. Then what did happen, Dante? Because from where I'm standing, you forced me into marriage, made me believe you were changing, made me believe this was becoming real, all while planning your exit strategy. It's complicated. It's really not. Tears threatened again, but she fought them back. You're a liar. Everything you said, about wanting to be better, about me making you want to try, it was manipulation. You're so good at it I almost didn't see it. Valentina, listen to me, he reached for her, but she jerked away. Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again. Her voice broke. I was starting to care about you. Do you understand that? I was falling for you, and you were calculating the optimal time to dispose of me like I'm some kind of business contract. I wasn't. His eyes were wild now, desperate. That conversation was from 2 weeks ago. Before. Before what? Before you decided I was worth keeping around a little longer? Before you realized you could get more use out of me? Before I realized I was falling in love with you? The words exploded into the space between them, raw and unfiltered. Silence. Valentina stared at him, breathing hard. You don't mean that. I do. He stepped closer, and this time she didn't retreat. I recorded that conversation with Marco 2 weeks ago, before things changed between us. Before the balcony mornings and the late-night talks and, his voice cracked. Before I understood what having you in my life actually meant. How convenient. Bitterness dripped from every word. Now that I've caught you, suddenly you're in love with me? I've been in love with you for weeks. His control shattered. Why do you think I've been trying to go legitimate? Why do you think I spend every moment I can with you and Luca? It's not strategy, Valentina. It's because for the first time in 15 years, I feel like I'm living instead of just surviving. Then why did you tell Marco the marriage was temporary? Why talk about reassessing? Because I'm terrified. The admission seemed to break something in him. Because I don't know how to be loved, how to keep someone without controlling them. Because every person I've ever loved has died or left, and I thought, he swallowed hard. I thought if I told myself it was temporary, it would hurt less when you inevitably realized what I am and left anyway. Valentina's anger wavered, but she held onto it like a shield. You're a coward. Yes. You're manipulative and controlling and... Yes. All of it. I'm everything you're accusing me of being. He looked at her with devastating honesty. But I'm also a man who's terrified of losing you. A man who wakes up every morning grateful you're in his home and goes to sleep every night wondering when you'll realize you deserve better. Stop it. She turned away. Stop trying to make this okay. You lied to me, Dante. Maybe not with words, but with silence. You let me believe this was becoming real while keeping your exit plan in your back pocket. So what do you want? His voice went hard, protective walls slamming back into place. You want me to say it's all been a lie? Fine. Everything I've done has been calculated. Every conversation, every touch, every vulnerable moment, all strategy. I'm a monster who can't feel anything real. Is that what you want to hear? Yes. No. She whirled on him. I want the truth. The truth is I don't know what I'm doing. He shouted. The truth is I forced you into this marriage for strategic reasons, and then I fell for you so hard I can't see straight. The truth is I'm making this up as I go, terrified every second that you'll see through me and realize I'm not worth loving. Maybe you're not. The words hit him like a physical blow. He actually stumbled back, and the devastation on his face was so raw, so real, that Valentina almost took it back. Almost. Get out, she whispered. Valentina. Get out. Her voice was ice. I can't look at you right now. I can't be in the same room with you. Just go. He stood there for a long moment, warring with himself. Then quietly, I love you. I know you don't believe me, but it's true. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving it if you'll let me. I won't. She turned her back on him. Now leave. She heard him walk to the door, heard it open. Then his voice, broken and small. I'm sorry. For all of it. For forcing this, for hurting you, for being exactly the monster you thought I was. The door closed softly. Valentina collapsed onto her bed and finally let herself shatter, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for the man she thought she'd been falling for. She cried for her naivety. She cried for the impossible situation that had no good ending. Most of all, she cried because despite everything, despite the lies and the manipulation and the betrayal, part of her still loved him. And that was the cruelest truth of all. In his office, Dante sat in darkness with a gun on his desk and a bottle of scotch he couldn't bring himself to open. He destroyed the best thing that had ever happened to him. Marco had been right all those weeks ago. Sentiment was dangerous in their world. He just hadn't realized the danger would be to himself. His phone buzzed. A message from Marco, Calabrese family making moves. They heard about the fight. See weakness. Need you focused. Dante stared at the message, then at the gun. Everything he touched turned to ash. Maybe it was time to let it all burn. For 3 days, they lived as ghosts in the same space. Valentina moved through the penthouse like a shadow, leaving early, returning late, avoiding every room where Dante might be. He didn't try to talk to her, didn't force proximity. The silence between them was a living thing, suffocating and absolute. She threw herself into work, into Luca's care, into anything that kept her from thinking about gray eyes and broken promises. But at night, alone in her room, she replayed every moment. Every conversation. Every touch. Trying to separate truth from manipulation and finding the line too blurred to distinguish. Had any of it been real? On the 4th day, everything changed. Valentina was at Dana-Farber, reading to Luca. His energy was better, his color returning, the treatment working miracles, when Marco burst into the room with 2 guards. We need to go. Now. Luca's eyes went wide with fear. Valentina stood, putting herself between her brother and the armed men. What's happening? The Calabrese family. They're making their move. Marco's jaw was tight. They know about the fight between you and Dante. They think he's distracted, vulnerable. They're hitting multiple locations simultaneously, our warehouses, our legitimate businesses. What does that have to do with? They're coming for Luca. Marco's eyes were grave. To force Dante's hand. We have minutes, maybe less. Ice flooded Valentina's veins. Where's Dante? Protecting the family interests. He's spread thin, trying to hold everything together. Marco moved toward Luca's bed. We need to evacuate the boy to a secure location. No. Luca's voice was small but fierce. He grabbed Valentina's hand. I'm not leaving without my sister. You'll both come, Marco assured him. But we need to move. An explosion of sound, not gunfire yet, but shouting in the hallway. Security alerts. The lockdown alarm shrieking to life. Too late, Marco breathed. He pulled his gun, positioned himself at the door. Get in the bathroom. Lock it. Don't come out for anyone but me or Dante. Marco. Now Valentina. She grabbed Luca, yanked out his 4 with shaking hands, and pulled him into the small bathroom. She locked the door, wrapped her arms around her brother, felt him trembling against her. I'm scared, he whispered. I know, baby. Me too. Outside, chaos erupted. Gunfire, sharp staccato cracks that made them both flinch. Shouting in Italian and English. Something heavy hit the door to Luca's room. Then Marco's voice. Boss, we're pinned down. 4th floor, oncology wing. They breached. More gunfire. Silence. Then a voice she didn't recognize. Clear the room. Find the boy. Valentina's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She looked around frantically, a window too small to crawl through, one flimsy lock between them and violence, nowhere to run. She pulled Luca tighter, covering his ears, praying to every god she'd stopped believing in years ago. The doorknob rattled. Once. Twice. "I know you're in there, Mrs. Moretti." The voice was smooth, cultured, mocking. "Come out, and the boy doesn't get hurt. We just want to have a conversation with your husband about respecting territory." "Don't open it," Luca breathed against her. "I won't. I promise." A crash. They were breaking down the door. Wood splintering. Valentina looked around desperately for anything to use as a weapon. She grabbed a metal soap dispenser, knowing it was useless but needing to hold something. The bathroom door shuddered under impact. Once. Twice. Then, nothing. Silence. It was somehow worse than the noise. Then a voice, cold and deadly and achingly familiar. "Take one more step toward that bathroom, and it's the last step you ever take." Dante Moretti. The other man's voice lost its mockery. "You're outnumbered. 3 of my men to you alone. Walk away. This doesn't have to." "I'm not walking away from them." The certainty in those words, absolute, unshakable, made Valentina's breath catch. She's just a wife. The boy's just leverage. Business is business. They're everything. Dante's voice was raw, anguished, fierce. "And you made the mistake of threatening everything I have left to lose." What happened next was fast and brutal. Valentina heard the violence through the door, impacts, grunts, bodies hitting floor. No gunshots. He was fighting hand to hand, probably because he didn't want to risk stray bullets reaching the bathroom. Risking himself to protect them. Then silence again. A soft knock. "Valentina. It's me. It's over. Open the door." She didn't move. Couldn't. Luca was shaking against her. "Please." His voice cracked. "Please let me see that you're okay. I need to see you." Slowly, hands trembling, she unlocked the door. Dante stood in the doorway, and he looked like war. Blood splattered across his face and shirt. Not his blood, she noted with distant clinical precision. His knuckles were split and bleeding. 3 men lay unconscious behind him, and Marco was on the phone coordinating cleanup, a makeshift bandage on his shoulder. But Dante's eyes, God, his eyes were wild, terrified, fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Are you hurt?" His hands hovered near her face but didn't touch, as if he'd lost the right. "Did they touch you?" "Did they?" "We're fine." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "You came." "Of course I came." He said it like there had never been any other option. "You're my wife. He's family. I would burn this entire city down before I'd let anyone hurt you." Marco appeared behind him. "Boss, we need to move. More could be coming. Take them to the safe house in Newton. Full security detail. No one gets within a mile." Dante was already moving, still not touching her but positioning himself between them and any threat. "I'll handle the Calabrese family." "Dante." Valentina grabbed his arm, stopping him. "What does handle mean?" He looked at her, and she saw it, the choice he was making in real time. The old Dante would have lied, would have softened it. This Dante told the truth. "It means I'm going to end this threat permanently. It means I'm going to do terrible things to terrible people." His jaw tightened. "It means I'm going to be the monster you accused me of being, because that's what keeps you safe. There has to be another way." "There isn't." He finally touched her, just his fingers against her cheek, so gentle it hurt. "This is who I am, Valentina. This is what I do. I destroy anyone who threatens what's mine. And you," his voice broke. "You and Luca are mine. Not as possessions. Not as assets. As family. As everything." Tears burned her eyes. "You can't just." "I can. I will." He leaned in, pressed his forehead to hers for just a moment. "I love you. I know you don't believe it, but I'll prove it. I'll prove it by keeping you safe, even if it means you hate me forever. Even if it means becoming everything you despise." "Dante. Go with Marco. Protect Luca. Let me protect you." He pulled back, and she saw it in his eyes. He was saying goodbye. Not forever, maybe, but to any hope of redemption. He was choosing her safety over his soul, and the weight of that choice was written across his face. "Don't do this," she whispered. "Don't become the monster for me. That's not what I want. It's what you need." He kissed her forehead, quick and desperate. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For not being the man you deserve. But I'll be the man who keeps you alive." Then he was gone, disappearing into the chaos with Marco's men at his back, and Valentina was left holding Luca and watching the man she loved walk toward violence he might not come back from. "Val." Luca's voice was small. "Is Dante going to be okay?" She didn't know. She didn't know anything anymore except that Dante Moretti had looked at her like she was worth dying for, worth killing for, worth sacrificing whatever humanity he had left. And she realized with terrible clarity, she believed him. He loved her. Not perfectly, not without complication, but genuinely. The kind of love that made terrible choices seem necessary. The kind of love that destroyed to protect. I don't know, she told Luca honestly, pulling him close as strange men ushered them toward safety. But I'm going to pray that he is. Because somewhere between resentment and rage, between betrayal and truth, she'd made a choice too. She loved him back. And that changed everything. 36 hours. That's how long Valentina waited in the Newton safe house, a converted Victorian mansion with armed guards at every entrance and windows that didn't open. Luca slept in the room next to hers, still recovering, still fragile, protected by men who answered to a ghost. Because Dante hadn't called. Hadn't sent word. Had disappeared into whatever darkness he'd gone to face, and the silence was eating her alive. Marco came by once, his shoulder properly bandaged now, his expression grim. Is he? Valentina couldn't finish the question. Alive, Marco confirmed. But the Calabrese situation required extensive resolution. Translation, blood. Violence. The monster fully unleashed. When will he come back? Marco's hesitation told her everything. He thinks you don't want to see him. Thinks after what he had to do, you'll never look at him the same way. That's not his choice to make. No. Marco studied her carefully. You told him to get out. Told him he wasn't worth loving. A man like Dante doesn't forget words like that. Guilt twisted in her chest. I was angry. I was hurt. I didn't mean. Didn't you? It wasn't accusatory, just honest. He's always believed he's a monster, Valentina. You just confirmed it for him. The truth of it hit her like a fist. She'd seen his vulnerability, his desperate attempt to be better, and when he'd stumbled, when he'd been human enough to be afraid of losing her, she'd thrown it back in his face. I need to see him, she said firmly. He's at the penthouse. But Valentina, Marco's voice went soft. He's in a bad place. The things he did to protect you and Luca, they cost him. Be sure you want to see what's left. She was sure. The penthouse was dark when she arrived, using the key she'd never returned. Luca was safe with Marco's most trusted men, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. This conversation needed to happen without her brother's innocent ears nearby. She found Dante in Gianna's room. He sat on the floor, back against the wall beneath his sister's photographs, a bottle of whiskey half empty beside him. Not drunk, his eyes were too clear, too haunted for that, but seeking oblivion he couldn't find. He looked up when she entered, and the devastation on his face broke her heart. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Neither should you. Not alone. She sat beside him, close enough to touch but not touching. Marco told me it's over. The Calabrese family is no longer a threat. They won't bother you or Luca again. His voice was hollow. The cost was high, but you're safe now. What cost? He laughed, bitter and broken. You don't want to know, Valentina. Trust me. Stop deciding what I want. She turned to face him fully. Stop protecting me from the truth. Stop treating me like I'm too fragile to handle who you are. You told me I wasn't worth loving. The words came out raw. You were right. Look what I did, the blood I spilled, the lines I crossed. All of it to keep you safe, and all I did was prove I'm exactly the monster you called me. You're not a monster. Yes, I am. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were drowning. I killed 6 men in the last 36 hours. Not in the heat of battle. Not in self-defense. I hunted them down methodically and eliminated them to send a message. That's what I am. That's what I'll always be. You did it to protect us. That doesn't make it noble. That makes it worse. He shook his head. I told myself I could be better. That loving you would change me, redeem me somehow. But the first real test came, and I reverted to exactly what I've always been, a killer who justifies violence through the people he claims to love. Valentina absorbed this, choosing her words carefully. Do you regret it? Protecting us? Never. Would you do it again? In a heartbeat. Then you're not a monster. She reached out, took his hand despite his half-hearted attempt to pull away. Monsters don't agonize over their choices. They don't build shrines to their guilt. They don't sit in the dark hating themselves for doing what was necessary. What I did wasn't necessary. It was excessive. It was love. Her voice was fierce. Violent, imperfect, terrifying love. And I was wrong to tell you that you weren't worth it. I was hurt and angry, and I lashed out at the one person who's been fighting to be better for me. Dante stared at her like she was speaking a language he didn't understand. How can you, after everything I've done, everything I am, how can you look at me like that? Like what? Like I'm worth saving. She cupped his face, forcing him to hold her gaze. Because you are. Because 3 weeks ago you made an 8-year-old boy laugh after his chemo. Because you're trying to go legitimate despite it making you vulnerable. Because when I was in danger, you didn't hesitate, you came for me knowing it might cost you everything. It did cost me everything. His voice cracked. It cost me you. No. She leaned in, pressed her forehead to his. You still have me. If you want me. Not because you forced me into marriage, not because of debt or obligation. Because I'm choosing you, Dante. I'm choosing this. Us. I don't understand. Tears tracked down his face, the first time she'd seen him cry openly. I gave you an out. I told Marco to prepare annulment papers once Luca was stable. You can leave. You can be free. I don't want to be free of you. She kissed him softly, tasting salt and whiskey and hope. I want to be free with you. To build something real. Something chosen. I'll hurt you again, he whispered against her lips. I'll make mistakes. I'll be controlling and difficult and I'll call you on it. I'll fight with you. I'll make you crazy. She smiled through her own tears. But I'll also love you. Completely. Honestly. For exactly who you are, monster and man both. He pulled back, searching her eyes for deception and finding only truth. I don't deserve this. Probably not. She kissed him again. But Gianna told you to find someone who makes you happy. And Dante, her voice went soft. You make me happy. Infuriated and terrified sometimes, but happy. I love you, he breathed. God, I love you so much it scares me. Good. Be scared. Be vulnerable. Be human. She stood, pulling him up with her. And be mine. For real this time. They kissed properly then, deep and desperate and real, all the walls finally down, all the pretense stripped away. When they broke apart, Dante's eyes held something she'd never seen before, peace. Marry me, he said suddenly. She laughed. We're already married. That was a contract. A transaction. He knelt, this powerful dangerous man on his knees before her, and pulled a ring from his pocket. Simple, elegant, nothing like the cold band he'd forced on her finger weeks ago. This is a choice. Valentina Maria Romano Moretti, will you marry me? For real this time. Because I'm falling for you, no, because I've already fallen, and I choose to stay fallen for the rest of my life. She pulled him up, kissed him until they were both breathless, and whispered against his lips, yes. 1,000 times yes. 3 months later. The second wedding was everything the first wasn't, sunlight and flowers and Luca as ring-bearer, his cancer in remission, his smile bright and genuine. A small ceremony in the garden. Dante had shown her that first night they'd connected, surrounded by people who actually mattered. Dr. Patel attended. Marco stood as best man. Even some of the hospital staff came, people who'd watched Valentina transform from exhausted nurse to radiant bride. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Luca stood up. I object, he announced, and everyone froze. Then he grinned mischievously. Just kidding. But Dante, if you hurt my sister, Captain Cure will find you. Laughter rippled through the garden. Dante knelt to Luca's level. Fair deal. And if I ever forget how lucky I am, you have permission to remind me. Every single day, Luca promised solemnly. This time when Dante kissed his bride, it was real. This time when Valentina said, I do, she meant it with every fiber of her being. From coercion to choice, from fear to love, what's the most powerful transformation you've seen? Share below. That evening, in the penthouse that had once been a prison and was now a home, they lay tangled together watching the city lights. Do you ever regret it? Dante asked quietly. Everything that brought us here? Valentina considered. I regret the pain, the fear, the lack of choice at the beginning. She turned to face him. But I don't regret where we ended up. Sometimes the worst beginnings lead to the best endings. I'll spend the rest of my life earning this, he promised. Earning you. You already have me. She kissed him softly. Now you just get to keep me. Forever. Forever. In Gianna's room, photographs watched over them, a young girl who'd begged her brother to find happiness, to choose love over rage. Somewhere, Valentina thought, she was smiling. They'd found their way home.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.